Our HOA president screamed, "She's a criminal," into her phone, calling 911 on my wife for not answering the door. When police arrived, she pointed at our house like a madwoman. "Arrest her now." But as my wife stepped outside, what she showed the officers froze them cold. Our president's smug victory turned to pure terror. She just targeted the one person who could destroy her. Comment karma if you're ready for the wildest neighborhood drama you've ever heard. Everything started 2 weeks after we moved into what we thought would be our dream neighborhood. Sarah had just gotten a big promotion at work, though she was being unusually secretive about it. While unpacking our kitchen boxes, she pulled me aside with that serious expression I'd learned to recognize. "Honey, please don't tell anyone what I do for work yet," she said, her voice carrying an edge I hadn't heard before. "I need some time to settle in before people know. Just tell them I work in finance if anyone asks." I nodded, figuring she had her reasons. Sarah was always the smart one in our relationship, and if she wanted to keep things quiet, I wasn't going to question it. Little did I know this simple request would lead to the most insane neighborhood drama I'd ever experienced. And that ice-cold feeling in my veins every time I thought about her secret would prove to be justified. It was a beautiful Saturday morning when I first laid eyes on Deborah, though beautiful would be the last word I'd use to describe our encounter. I was in the front yard, trying to figure out which box had our garden tools, when I noticed this woman standing on the sidewalk, arms crossed, staring at our house like it had personally offended her. She was probably in her late 50s with that typical "I want to speak to your manager" haircut that should have been my first warning sign. She watched me struggle with the boxes for a good 5 minutes before finally marching over. And I mean marching, like she was on some kind of military mission. "I'm Deborah, president of the Homeowners Association," she announced, thrusting a thick binder into my hands. "These are the HOA rules and regulations. You must read every single page." The binder had to be at least 300 pages thick, and I'm not exaggerating. I flipped through it briefly, seeing rules about everything from grass height to the acceptable shade of beige for garage doors. "Wow, this is comprehensive," I said, trying to be polite. Deborah's eyes narrowed. "We take our community standards very seriously here. I'll be checking in to make sure you're in compliance." That's when little Tommy from next door came riding by on his bike. He was maybe 8 years old, all freckles and energy. "Hi, mister," he called out cheerfully, then looked at Deborah and his smile faded. "Why are you always so angry, Mrs. Deborah?" Kids. They just say what everyone's thinking, don't they? Sarah chose that moment to come outside, and I swear the temperature dropped 10 degrees. She was carrying a box labeled "Office," her dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. Even in jeans and a t-shirt, she had this air of authority about her that I had always found attractive, but now seemed almost intimidating. Deborah's eyes locked onto her immediately. "And you are?" Deborah asked, her tone suggesting Sarah needed permission to exist in her own front yard. "Sarah, Michael's wife," my wife replied calmly, setting down the box. "Nice to meet you." But Deborah was staring at her with this weird expression, like she was trying to place her. "You look familiar. What do you do for work?" There was something aggressive in the way she asked, like it was an interrogation rather than small talk. "Finance," Sarah lied smoothly. "Pretty boring stuff." Deborah didn't look convinced, but Tommy provided a distraction by crashing his bike into our mailbox. "Sorry," Tommy called out, scrambling to pick up his bike. Sarah walked over to help him, and I noticed how Deborah watched her every move, suspicion written all over her face. "You okay, buddy?" Sarah asked Tommy, checking his scraped knee. "I'm fine. Hey, are you a police officer? You look like one." Kids and their observations. Sarah just laughed. "No, sweetie, I work with numbers, not bad guys." She ruffled his hair and sent him on his way, but I caught the look Deborah gave her. Pure venom. Later, after Deborah finally left, Taking her rule book and attitude with her, Sarah and I sat on our porch. "That woman gives me the creeps," I admitted. Sarah just smiled that mysterious smile of hers. "Don't worry about her. People like that always hang themselves if you give them enough rope." The ice in my veins told me Sarah knew exactly what she was talking about. Over the next few days, Deborah made her presence known in the most annoying ways possible. The emails started almost immediately. "Your tree appears to be 2.5 millimeters over the height restriction. Your trash cans were placed at a 15-degree angle from the approved position. Your vehicle extends half an inch beyond the designated parking area." I'm not making this up. She actually measured these things. Each email was copied to the entire HOA board, like she was building some kind of case against us. I wanted to respond, to tell her to get a life. But Sarah always stopped me. "Let her waste her energy," she'd say. "We've done nothing wrong." But I could see it was bothering her too, especially when Deborah started her patrol walks past our house 3 times a day, always slowing down to inspect our property. That knot in my stomach grew tighter each time I saw that red blazer prowling our street. The neighbors started warning us about Deborah's history. She made the Johnsons repaint their fence 3 times because the shade wasn't exactly Sahara beige, one elderly neighbor whispered to me at the mailbox. And poor Mrs. Chen had to rehome her beloved Pomeranian because Deborah documented every single bark and filed a formal complaint. Another neighbor told me Deborah's son had been arrested last year, something about a misunderstanding, but ever since then, Deborah had become even more controlling and suspicious of anyone she thought had authority. The pieces were starting to come together, but I had no idea how explosive this puzzle would become. Then came the day that started the real war. It was a Thursday afternoon, and I was at work when it happened. Sarah later told me she was on an important video call, something she couldn't interrupt. Deborah chose that exact moment to come knocking, and when I say knocking, I mean pounding on our door like she was trying to break it down. Sarah could see her on the security camera, red-faced and furious about something, but she couldn't leave her call. For 20 minutes, Deborah knocked, rang the doorbell, and even tried peering through the windows. Finally, she stormed off, but not before shouting loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear. "I know you're in there. I'll show you who runs this neighborhood." When Sarah told me about it that evening, I tried to laugh it off, but she had this look in her eyes. "She's escalating," Sarah said quietly. "People like her don't just give up." I should have taken that warning more seriously, because 24 hours later, as I was coming home from work, I heard the sound that made my blood run cold. Police sirens, getting closer and closer to our house. What do you think Deborah knows about Sarah? Drop your best guess in the comments, and the most creative answer gets a heart from me. The day after the door pounding incident, I found an official-looking envelope stuffed in our mailbox. Practically bursting with self-importance. It was from the HOA, of course, with Deborah's name prominently displayed as the sender. "Official warning. Violation of HOA regulations," the letter began, and it went downhill from there. According to Deborah, we had violated multiple codes, including failure to maintain neighborly communication standards and creating a hostile environment by refusing reasonable interaction. The letter threatened fines up to $5,000 and possible legal action if we didn't comply with community standards immediately. I read it out loud to Sarah over dinner, trying to keep the anger out of my voice. She took the letter from me, scanned it once, then did something I didn't expect. She laughed. Not a nervous laugh, but a genuine, amused chuckle. "She's really reaching now," Sarah said, then calmly tore the letter in half and tossed it in the trash. "Shouldn't we respond to this?" I asked, feeling my anxiety spike. What if she actually tries to fine us? Sarah reached across the table and took my hand. "Trust me, honey, she's digging her own grave. The more she escalates, the worse it'll be for her in the end. But I couldn't share her confidence. That night, I stared at the ceiling, Deborah's threats replaying in my head. Each word felt like ice in my veins. What if Sarah's secret put a target on her back? What if this escalated beyond neighborhood drama? I even called my mother, something I rarely did. Mom, I think we should come stay with you for a while, I said, only half joking. This neighbor's insane. My mother, bless her, just laughed. Michael, you're 35 years old. You can't run home every time someone's mean to you. She was right, of course, but that didn't make me feel any better. The next morning, I left for work early, hoping to avoid any confrontation with Deborah. Sarah kissed me goodbye, that same calm smile on her face. Have a good day, honey. Don't worry so much. I should have known something was going to happen when I saw Deborah setting up her phone on a tripod in her front yard around noon. My coworker Jake was giving me a ride home for lunch since my car was in the shop, and we both saw her there, talking animatedly to her phone. Is she live streaming? Jake asked, incredulous. I groaned. That's our HOA president. She's been hassling us since we moved in. We couldn't hear what she was saying, but she kept gesturing toward our house. As we pulled into my driveway, I had this sinking feeling in my stomach. Sarah's car was in the garage, so I knew she was home, probably in another one of her important meetings. I thanked Jake for the ride and headed inside, trying to ignore Deborah's theatrical performance across the street. But I couldn't ignore what happened next. I was in the kitchen making a sandwich when I heard Deborah's voice getting louder through the window. I could see her on her phone, not live streaming anymore, but making an actual call. Her face was red, and she was pacing back and forth on her lawn like a caged animal. Then I heard the words that made my blood run cold. Hello, 911. I need to report an emergency. My sandwich forgotten. I pressed closer to the window to hear better. There's a suspicious woman at 3427 Maple Street who refuses to answer her door or interact with neighbors. She could be doing something illegal in there. I've seen her sneaking around, and she looks just like someone I saw in a wanted poster. My jaw dropped. Was she seriously calling the cops on Sarah for not answering the door? Ma'am, can you describe the actual emergency? I heard the dispatcher's tiny voice through Deborah's phone. She had it on speaker, probably for her audience. The emergency is that she could be a criminal. She could be making drugs or planning something terrible. I demand you send officers immediately. Deborah's voice had reached a pitch that could probably break glass. Has this person threatened you or committed any crime? The dispatcher asked patiently. She's threatening our entire neighborhood by being secretive and antisocial. That's suspicious behavior. I know criminals when I see them. The call went on for another 5 minutes, with Deborah getting more and more worked up, inventing details about Sarah's suspicious activities that were completely fabricated. She mentioned seeing strange packages being delivered, which were actually just our moving boxes, and unusual visitors, which was literally just the pizza delivery guy. 20 minutes later, I heard the sirens. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. A police cruiser pulled up in front of our house, and I watched Officer Martinez step out. He looked young, maybe mid-20s, with the kind of nervous energy that suggested he was still relatively new to the force. Deborah practically ran to meet him, her phone still in her hand, probably recording everything. Officer, thank goodness you're here. That woman is dangerous. I just know it, she exclaimed, pointing dramatically at our house. Martinez looked confused, but tried to maintain his professional demeanor. Ma'am, I need you to calm down and explain exactly what crime has been committed, he said, pulling out his notepad. She won't answer her door. She's hiding something, Deborah insisted. When people don't answer doors, it means they're up to no good. You need to search that house immediately. Martinez sighed, and I could see him trying to process this ridiculous situation. Not answering the door isn't a crime, ma'am. Do you have any actual evidence of illegal activity? But Deborah wasn't backing down. I'm the HOA president. I know this neighborhood, and I know when something's wrong. That woman is trouble, and I demand you do something about it. That's when I decided I needed to go outside. My hands were shaking as I opened the front door, but before I could step out, I saw Sarah emerge from our garage. She must have heard the commotion and decided to handle it herself. She was wearing her usual casual clothes, jeans, and a simple blouse. But there was something different about her posture, something I'd never seen before. She walked with a confidence that seemed to make even Officer Martinez stand a little straighter. "Good afternoon, officer," Sarah said calmly, approaching Martinez with her hands visible and relaxed. "Is there a problem?" Martinez looked relieved to be dealing with someone rational. "Ma'am, we've received a call about suspicious activity at this address. I just need to ask you a few questions." Deborah interjected immediately. "She's been avoiding everyone. She won't answer her door. She's hiding something. I know it." Sarah didn't even look at Deborah. She kept her eyes on Martinez, and I noticed her reach behind her back. Martinez noticed too, and his hand moved instinctively toward his weapon. "She's got something," Deborah screeched. "She's armed." But when Sarah brought her hand forward, what she held made Martinez freeze completely. It wasn't a weapon. It was something far more powerful, at least for Deborah. A small silver badge that caught the afternoon sunlight. And the look on Martinez's face told me everything I needed to know. This was about to get very interesting. What do you think Sarah's holding that made the officer freeze? Drop your wildest guess in the comments right now. The silence that followed seemed to stretch for eternity, though it probably only lasted a few seconds. Officer Martinez stood there looking at whatever Sarah was holding, his eyes growing wider by the second. I couldn't see what it was from my position at the window, but I could see the color draining from his face. Deborah, meanwhile, was practically vibrating with anticipation, clearly thinking she was about to witness Sarah being arrested. Or worse. "Officer, what are you waiting for?" Deborah demanded, her phone still held high to capture every moment. "Arrest her. She's obviously hiding something." But Martinez wasn't listening to her anymore. His entire focus was on Sarah. And when he finally spoke, his voice cracked like a teenager's. "Is that, are you? Oh my God." He straightened up so fast I thought he might pull a muscle, his hand snapping up in a salute. Chief Johnson, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Nobody told me you were, ma'am, Chief, sir, The words hit me like a physical force. "Chief? Did he just call my wife Chief?" I must have misheard, but then Martinez continued, his words tumbling over each other in his panic. "Chief Johnson, I sincerely apologize. I was just responding to a call about suspicious activity. I had no idea it was your residence. The dispatcher didn't mention, and I haven't seen the memo yet about your appointment." And Sarah held up a hand, and Martinez stopped talking immediately, standing at attention like he was back in the academy. "At ease, Officer Martinez," Sarah said, her voice carrying an authority I'd never heard before. "You are just doing your job. I appreciate your diligence." She turned slightly, giving me a view of what she was holding. A police badge. But not just any badge. Even from the window, I could see the star and the words embossed on it. Chief of Police. My knees went weak. My wife, the woman I'd been married to for 7 years, who I thought worked some boring finance job, was the Chief of Police, the highest-ranking law enforcement officer in our entire city. How was that possible? How had I not known? My mind raced back through the past few weeks, looking for clues I must have missed. The late-night phone calls she'd taken in the garage. The suits I'd assumed were for board meetings. The way she always seemed to know when speed traps were set up on my commute. It all made sense now. But it also made no sense at all. Why hadn't she told me? As these thoughts crashed through my brain, I became aware of another sound. Deborah, making a noise like a deflating balloon. "No," Deborah whispered, her phone dropping to her side. "No, That's not possible. You can't be. You're lying. This is fake. Her face went through a remarkable transformation, cycling through colors I didn't know human faces could achieve. First, the red of embarrassment, then the white of shock, followed by a sickly green that made her look like she might vomit right there on our lawn. And finally, settling on a purple that matched her designer HOA president blazer. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, no sound coming out. Martinez, meanwhile, looked like he wanted the ground to open up and swallow him whole. Chief, should I, should I file a report about the false emergency call? He asked hesitantly. Mrs. Henderson here has made some pretty serious false accusations. It's Miss Cunningham, Deborah corrected automatically, though her voice was barely above a whisper. Sarah studied her for a long moment, and I could see the wheels turning in my wife's head. Officer Martinez, she said finally, I want you to document everything. The false 911 call, the harassment over the past 2 weeks, and especially the part where Miss Cunningham claimed I was a criminal based on absolutely no evidence. Make sure you note that she's the HOA president and has been using her position to harass new residents. Martinez pulled out his notepad, scribbling furiously. Yes, ma'am. Should I, place her under arrest for misuse of emergency services? The question hung in the air like a sword over Deborah's head. That's when the circus really began. Neighbors who had been pretending to water their lawns or check their mail suddenly gave up all pretense and came out to openly gawk. Tommy rolled up on his bike again, his eyes wide with excitement. Whoa, Mrs. Sarah is a cop, a real cop. He looked at his friends who had joined him. I told you she looked like a cop. Pay up. Apparently, the neighborhood kids had been taking bets. Smart money was on Sarah being everything from a secret agent to a professional wrestler. Police chief hadn't even made the list. Someone shouted, "Karma," from across the street, and I saw phones coming out everywhere. This was about to be all over social media, and Deborah knew it. Her face, already cycling through impossible colors, now took on a desperate expression. Wait, Deborah suddenly shouted, a manic smile spreading across her face. You think you've won? You think this is over? She held up her phone triumphantly. I have evidence. I have proof that you're not fit to be police chief. She waved the phone around like it was a weapon. I know things about you, Sarah Johnson. One phone call and your career is over. The mayor will hear about this. The city council. The media. She was practically cackling now, reminding me of every movie villain who thinks they have one last card to play. Sarah's expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in her eyes. For the first time since this whole thing started, she looked concerned. No, that wasn't right. She looked calculating. Miss Cunningham, Sarah said, her voice dangerously quiet. I'd be very careful about making threats, especially in front of a witness. She gestured to Officer Martinez, who was still taking notes, and especially when those threats involve blackmail against a law enforcement official. But Deborah was beyond reason now. It's not blackmail if it's true, she screeched. I have the photo. I have the proof. You were at that place, doing that thing with those people. She was being deliberately vague, probably trying to make Sarah sweat without revealing what she actually knew or thought she knew. The crowd was eating this up, phones recording every second. This was better than any reality TV show. Sarah took a step forward, and Deborah actually backed up, clutching her phone to her chest. Show me, Sarah said simply. If you have something, show everyone right now. It was a challenge, delivered with the confidence of someone who either had nothing to hide or knew exactly how to handle whatever was coming. Deborah's thumb hovered over her phone screen, her eyes darting between Sarah, Officer Martinez, and the growing crowd of neighbors. I'll show it to the proper authorities, she stammered. Not here. Not in front of... She gestured weakly at the crowd. This is official HOA business. Sarah smiled then, and it wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just cornered their prey. Officer Martinez is a proper authority. So am I. Show us what you have, or admit you have nothing. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife, and everyone seemed to be holding their breath, waiting to see what Deborah's supposed trump card was. What could Deborah possibly have on a police chief? Wrong answers only in the comments, and the funniest one gets pinned. The standoff in our front yard felt like it lasted hours, but it was probably only a minute before Deborah's bravado completely crumbled. Her phone hand started shaking, and she slowly lowered it to her side. I, I need to consult with my lawyer first, she muttered, which everyone knew meant she had absolutely nothing. Sarah nodded to Officer Martinez, who stepped forward with his notepad. Miss Cunningham, I'm going to need you to come down to the station to file a formal statement about your 911 call, he said, trying to sound authoritative, despite being obviously rattled by the situation. Deborah's eyes went wide. What? No, I'm not going anywhere. I know my rights. Martinez looked to Sarah for guidance, and my wife gave him a subtle nod. Ma'am, you're not under arrest, Martinez clarified, yet. But you did make a false emergency call, and we need to document everything properly. You can either come voluntarily or... This is harassment, Deborah shrieked, spinning around to address the growing crowd of neighbors. You all see this, right? She's using her position to silence me. I'm trying to protect our neighborhood. But the crowd wasn't buying it. I could hear murmurs of, about time someone stood up to her. And she had this coming for years. One elderly man called out, Deborah, you tried to fine me $300 because my garden gnome was facing the wrong direction. Another neighbor added, you made my daughter cry because her Girl Scout cookies were soliciting. The tide had turned completely against Deborah, and she knew it. She looked around desperately for support, but found none. Even the other HOA board members who had shown up were keeping their distance, probably already planning emergency meetings to discuss her removal. Sarah stepped forward, addressing the crowd. Folks, I apologize for the disturbance. As you've probably figured out, I'm the new chief of police. I wanted to keep a low profile while settling in. But circumstances have forced my hand. She gestured to Deborah. I want to assure everyone that I take all concerns seriously. Legitimate concerns. What I don't tolerate is harassment, false reports, or abuse of the emergency system. The crowd nodded approvingly, and someone actually started clapping. Soon half the neighborhood was applauding, which seemed to be the final straw for Deborah. You haven't heard the last of this, she hissed at Sarah. I have connections. I know people. The mayor plays golf with my cousin. Sarah just smiled. Please give the mayor my regards. I had dinner with him last week to discuss my appointment. The next few hours were a blur. Officer Martinez escorted a deflated Deborah to his patrol car, not in handcuffs, but certainly not as a voluntary passenger. The neighbors gradually dispersed, though not before many of them introduced themselves properly to Sarah, apologizing for not warning us about Deborah sooner. Tommy and his friends hung around the longest, pestering Sarah with questions about being a police chief. Do you have a gun? Have you ever caught bad guys? Can you do a backflip? That last one made Sarah laugh. No backflips, buddy. That's more of an action movie thing. After everyone finally left, Sarah and I sat on our porch, and I had about 1,000,000 questions. So, police chief, I started, not sure whether to be impressed, confused, or hurt that she hadn't told me. I'm sorry I didn't tell you, Sarah said, taking my hand. It was all happening so fast. The appointment was confidential until the official announcement next week. There's been some sensitive investigations going on, and we needed to keep everything quiet. She explained how she'd been deputy chief in our old city, And when the chief position opened up here, she was headhunted for the job. I was going to surprise you after the announcement. Take you to that fancy steakhouse you like, tell you over champagne. I had to admit, that would have been a better reveal than having our crazy neighbor force it out. So all those finance meetings, I asked, department meetings, budget reviews, hiring committees. She squeezed my hand. I wasn't lying exactly. I do work with numbers, just crime numbers. That night, I barely slept again, but for entirely different reasons. My wife was the police chief, the actual boss of all the cops in our city. How had I not seen it? Though looking back, the signs were there. She always insisted on driving because she knew the best routes. She never worried about walking alone at night. She could shut down arguments with just a look. And there was that time she perfectly executed a takedown move on a door-to-door salesman who got too aggressive. She'd said it was from a self-defense class, but now I knew better. Around 3 in the morning, I heard Sarah on the phone in the bathroom, her voice low and serious. I caught fragments of conversation about investigations and maintaining cover, and something about the situation being handled. The conversation that really caught my attention went something like this. Yes, sir, I understand. No, she doesn't have anything substantial. I was careful. The Johnson case? That was 5 years ago in a different jurisdiction. There's no way she could. A pause. What do you mean someone leaked it? My blood ran cold. Sarah sounded worried, which never happened. If Cunningham got hold of those sealed records, no, you're right. We need to get ahead of this. Another long pause. Moving? No, that's not. I can't just uproot my family because... Her voice cracked slightly. I understand. If it comes to that, we'll do what's necessary. But I'm not running from a suburban HOA president with delusions of grandeur. When she came back to bed, I pretended to be asleep, but my mind was racing. What was the Johnson case? What sealed records? And why would we need to move? The next morning, over coffee, I tried to probe gently. Everything okay with work? I asked casually. Sarah looked at me over her mug, and I could see her deciding how much to share. Deborah might be more resourceful than we thought, she admitted. She's been making calls, trying to dig up dirt. She won't find anything actionable, but... She trailed off. But what? I pressed. But sometimes in this job, you make decisions that look different out of context. And people like Deborah excel at taking things out of context. The way she said it made me realize this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Deborah might have lost the battle, but she was clearly planning to win the war. And if I knew anything about my wife now, it was that she didn't become police chief by backing down from fights. Sarah's hiding something about the Johnson case that has her worried. What do you think it could be? Hit that like button if you need to know what happens next. The next few days were surprisingly quiet, which somehow made everything worse. It was like waiting for the other shoe to drop, except the shoe was probably a steel-toed boot aimed directly at our lives. Sarah went to work as usual, now openly wearing her chief's uniform, which I had to admit looked pretty incredible on her. The neighbors treated us differently too, some with newfound respect, others with the kind of nervous politeness reserved for people who could theoretically have them arrested. But Deborah had vanished completely, and that silence was deafening. She's planning something, Sarah said over breakfast on day 3. People like her don't just give up. They regroup and come back harder. I believed her, especially after what I'd overheard on that late-night phone call. The Johnson case, whatever that was, clearly had Sarah rattled, though she was doing her best to hide it. My coworkers had already heard about the incident because, of course, they had. In a city this size, news traveled fast, especially when it involved someone calling the cops on the actual chief of police. Dude, your wife is a total badass, Jake said during lunch. I saw the video on social media. That HOA lady looked like she was about to have a stroke. Apparently, multiple neighbors had uploaded videos of the confrontation, and they were spreading like wildfire. The comment sections were brutal, all mocking Deborah and praising Sarah. "Show this to every Karen who thinks they run the neighborhood," one comment read. Another said, "This is why you mind your own business." But mixed in with the jokes and memes, I noticed something concerning. Some comments mentioned Deborah by name, talking about her research and upcoming revelations. It seemed she had supporters, or at least people who enjoyed drama enough to egg her on. That evening, Tommy knocked on our door, his little face serious. "Mrs. Sarah, I thought you should know something," he said solemnly. Sarah knelt down to his level. "What is it, buddy?" Tommy looked around conspiratorially before whispering, "Mrs. Cunningham is at the library every day. My mom works there, and she says Mrs. Cunningham is using all the computers and printing lots of papers." He paused dramatically. "Mom thinks she's researching you." Sarah ruffled his hair. "Thanks for the intel, detective. You'd make a good cop someday." After Tommy left, proud of his spy work, Sarah's expression darkened. "She's digging into public records," she muttered. "Court documents, news archives, everything she can find." I felt my stomach drop. Should we be worried? Sarah didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. Later that night, I did my own research. I'm not proud of it, but I Googled my wife's name, along with various combinations of words like controversy, investigation, and Johnson case. Most of what came up was routine. Commendations, successful arrests, community outreach programs. But buried on the third page of results, I found a brief mention of a case from 5 years ago. Deputy Chief S. Johnson cleared of wrongdoing in suspect injury case, the headline read. The article was vague, mentioning only that an investigation had found no evidence of misconduct, and that records had been sealed at the request of all parties. It wasn't much, but it was something. And if I could find it, so could Deborah. The question was, what else was out there that hadn't made it online? My answer came sooner than expected. The next morning, there was a new email in our HOA inbox. Not from Deborah directly, but from Concerned Residents for Neighborhood Integrity, which was obviously Deborah trying to sound official. The email contained a single line. Emergency HOA meeting scheduled for Thursday evening. Attendance mandatory. Important information regarding neighborhood safety will be discussed. It was signed by 3 HOA board members, though I'd bet money Deborah had pressured them into it. Sarah read the email over my shoulder, her jaw tightening. "She found something," Sarah said quietly. "Or she thinks she did." I turned to face her. "Sarah, what is the Johnson case? What happened 5 years ago?" She was quiet for so long, I thought she wouldn't answer. Finally, she spoke. "A suspect got hurt during an arrest. He claimed excessive force. The investigation cleared me, but..." She paused. "But the optics weren't great. And if someone presents it the right way, out of context..." So on. She didn't need to finish. I could see where this was going. Deborah was going to try to paint Sarah as some kind of brutal cop who didn't deserve to be chief. It didn't matter if it was true or not. In the court of public opinion, accusations often carried more weight than facts. "So what do we do?" I asked. Sarah's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "We go to the meeting, and we let her play her hand." There was something in her voice that made me think Sarah had a few cards of her own to play. But as Thursday approached, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was going to get ugly. Deborah had spent days preparing her attack, and she'd have home field advantage with the HOA meeting. What I didn't know yet was that Sarah had been preparing too, and she had resources Deborah couldn't even imagine. Why is Sarah so confident about the HOA meeting? What's her secret weapon? First 10 correct guesses get a personal shout-out. Thursday evening arrived with all the anticipation of a heavyweight boxing match. Except instead of a ring, we had the community center. And instead of boxing gloves, we had passive-aggressive neighborhood politics. The meeting was scheduled for 7, but by 6:45, the parking lot was already packed. Word had spread throughout the neighborhood about this emergency meeting, and everyone wanted to witness what promised to be the showdown of the century. As Sarah and I walked up to the entrance, I noticed people actually stepping aside to let us pass, some nodding respectfully to Sarah, others avoiding eye contact entirely. The whole thing felt surreal, like walking into a modern-day gladiator arena, where the weapons were words and the armor was righteousness. Inside the community center was standing room only. Deborah had clearly pulled out all the stops, even having a projection screen set up at the front of the room. She stood at the podium wearing what I can only describe as her power outfit, a crisp red blazer that screamed, "I mean business," and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The other HOA board members sat at a table to her left, looking uncomfortable and avoiding everyone's gaze. They knew they were pawns in Deborah's game, but they were too spineless to stand up to her. As we found seats in the third row, I could feel hundreds of eyes on us. Sarah sat perfectly calm, her posture relaxed, like she was attending a routine budget meeting instead of what was essentially her own trial. I, on the other hand, was sweating bullets. "Thank you all for coming," Deborah began, her voice carrying that fake sweetness that made my teeth hurt. "I know this was short notice, but when it comes to the safety and integrity of our neighborhood, we cannot afford to wait." She clicked a remote, and the projection screen came to life with a title slide, "Protecting Our Community, a presentation by concerned residents." I had to hand it to her. She'd put effort into this. "As you all know," Deborah continued, "we recently discovered that our new neighbor, Sarah Johnson, is not who she claimed to be. She told us she worked in finance, but she's actually the new chief of police." She paused for dramatic effect, as if being a police chief was somehow scandalous. Now, normally, having law enforcement in our neighborhood would be a good thing, but I've done some research, and what I found is deeply troubling. Click. The next slide showed a newspaper headline from 5 years ago. "Deputy Chief Involved in Controversial Arrest." The article was from a small-town newspaper 3 states away, and the photo was grainy, but it was definitely Sarah. I felt her tense slightly beside me, the first sign of any reaction. Deborah's smile widened. 5 years ago, Sarah Johnson was involved in an incident where a suspect suffered significant injuries during arrest. The suspect, a father of 3, claimed excessive force was used. He spent weeks in the hospital. Click. Another slide, this one showing a photo of a man in a hospital bed, looking pretty banged up. The crowd murmured uneasily. "Now," Deborah continued, clearly relishing the moment, "the official investigation cleared Deputy Chief Johnson, but we all know how these things work. Cops protecting cops. The thin blue line. And now this person is in charge of our entire police force." She had more slides, each one carefully crafted to paint Sarah in the worst possible light. Quotes taken out of context, statistics about police brutality, even a section about property values decreasing in neighborhoods with controversial figures. It was a masterclass in manipulation, and I could see some people in the crowd starting to buy it. Whispers rippled through the room, and more than a few concerned looks were shot our way. But Sarah still hadn't moved, hadn't reacted, just sat there watching Deborah's performance with an expression of mild interest. It was starting to freak me out. Why wasn't she defending herself? Why wasn't she angry? Then I noticed something. She was counting silently, her lips barely moving. What was she counting down to? "In conclusion," Deborah said, building to her crescendo, "I motion that the HOA formally request Chief Johnson's resignation from her position for the safety and reputation of our neighborhood. All in favor?" Hands started going up around the room. Maybe 30%, then 40, then 50. People who had applauded Sarah just days ago were now raising their hands against her, swayed by Deborah's presentation. It was mob mentality at its finest, and Deborah was glowing with triumph. The motion passes, she declared, even though it wasn't an official vote, and the HOA had absolutely no authority over the police department. Chief Johnson, do you have anything to say for yourself? All eyes turned to Sarah, who slowly stood up. The room went dead silent, everyone waiting to hear her defense. But instead of going to the podium, she simply reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a single folded document. Miss Cunningham, Sarah said, her voice carrying easily through the silent room. That was quite a presentation. You clearly put a lot of work into it. Just one question. Did you happen to verify the current status of that case you mentioned? Deborah's smile faltered slightly. The facts speak for themselves. That man was injured during your arrest. Sarah nodded. He was. And do you know why? She unfolded the document in her hands. Would you like me to tell everyone here what that father of three was doing when I arrested him? Or should I just skip to the part where he pled guilty to all charges? The color drained from Deborah's face. That's not relevant to... But Sarah wasn't done. Thomas Mitchell, convicted of running a methamphetamine lab in a house with 3 children present. The injuries he sustained were from the explosion he caused while trying to destroy evidence. An explosion that could have killed those kids if I hadn't pulled them out first. The crowd's murmur changed tone entirely, from suspicion to shock. But Sarah still wasn't finished. She held up the document. This is a letter from the mayor, the governor, and the state attorney general, commending my actions that day and specifically noting that I risked my own life to save those children. One of whom, by the way, wrote to me last Christmas to thank me for giving him a chance at a normal life. She turned to address the crowd directly. Every single document Miss Cunningham showed you is public record. What she didn't show you were the follow-up stories, the commendations, the fact that the victim is currently serving 25 to life for child endangerment and drug manufacturing. She showed you a carefully edited version of the truth, designed to manipulate your emotions. The room erupted. People were shouting questions, some at Deborah, some at Sarah. The HOA board members looked like they wanted to crawl under the table, but the best part was still coming. Sarah raised her hand for silence, and surprisingly, got it. There's one more thing, she said, turning back to Deborah. You've now publicly slandered a law enforcement official using deliberately misleading information. You've incited harassment against a public servant, and you've been recorded doing it. She gestured to the multiple phones that had been recording the entire meeting. My legal team will be in touch. The silence that followed was deafening. Deborah stood at the podium, mouth opening and closing, no sound coming out. Her big moment, her carefully planned attack, had just blown up in her face more spectacularly than that meth lab. And the night wasn't over yet. Deborah just got fact-checked into oblivion. But Tommy knows something that could make this even worse for her. Type karma loading if you want to see how this ends. The weeks following the HOA meeting were relatively peaceful, which in our neighborhood meant Deborah was only glaring at us from her window instead of actively harassing us. She'd been removed from her HOA president position in an emergency vote, and rumor had it she was facing a civil lawsuit from Sarah's legal team. But if you thought that would be the end of Deborah Cunningham, you clearly didn't know how persistent a wounded Karen could be. She kept a low profile, but I'd catch glimpses of her around the neighborhood, always watching, always scowling like a cartoon villain plotting revenge. Sarah seemed unconcerned, going about her duties as police chief with the same calm professionalism she brought to everything. But I knew my wife well enough to see the slight tension in her shoulders, the way she checked the security cameras a little more often than necessary. Something was coming. We both felt it. Then came the announcement for the neighborhood's annual outdoor movie night, a tradition that had been going on for 20 years. This year, they were showing some family-friendly animated film, and the whole community was invited to bring blankets and snacks to the park. "We should go," Sarah suggested over dinner. "Show that we're part of the community." I agreed, though part of me wondered if it was wise to attend such a public event. But Sarah was right. We couldn't hide forever. Plus, Tommy had been excitedly telling us about it for days, promising to save us a good spot near his family. The kid had become something of a local celebrity after his spy work during the Deborah saga, and he wore his junior detective badge, a gift from Sarah, everywhere he went. His YouTube channel had exploded too, though I hadn't checked the exact numbers lately. The night of the movie arrived warm and clear, perfect for an outdoor event. The park was already filling up when we arrived, families spreading out blankets and setting up lawn chairs. A massive inflatable screen had been erected at one end of the field with a professional projection system that must have cost thousands. We found Tommy and his family near the middle, and the boy waved enthusiastically. "This is Sarah. Mr. Michael, I saved you spots." As we settled in, I noticed something that made my stomach clench. Deborah was there, sitting alone at the very back of the crowd, wearing sunglasses despite the growing darkness, and a baseball cap pulled low. "She's here," I whispered to Sarah. My wife glanced over casually. "I see her. Just ignore her. She's allowed to attend public events." But something felt off about Deborah being here. As the sun set and the movie equipment was being tested, Tommy pulled out his iPad, proudly showing us his YouTube channel. "Look at this," he exclaimed, his eyes wide with excitement. He clicked on a video titled "Crazy Karen Calls Police on Police Chief," full version. My jaw dropped. 3.7 million views. "Tommy," his mother scolded, but she was smiling. "Don't shout about view counts." "But Mom, I'm actually viral," Tommy protested, his excitement infectious. Soon families around us were looking at his iPad, marveling at the view count. "Play it," someone suggested. "I haven't seen the whole thing." Tommy looked at his parents for permission, and his dad shrugged. "Sure, but keep the volume down." What happened next was one of those perfect storm moments that you couldn't plan if you tried. As Tommy started playing the video, one of the event organizers was testing the projection system, cycling through different inputs. Tommy's iPad, which had been connected to his family's portable speaker, somehow interfaced with the main projection system. I still don't understand the technical details, something about screen mirroring and Bluetooth connections, but the result was instantaneous and devastating. Tommy's video appeared on the massive inflatable screen, blown up to movie theater proportions. The audio boomed through the professional sound system. Deborah's voice echoed across the park. "She's suspicious. Arrest her. She's a criminal." 500 people turned to watch, mesmerized. On the giant screen, they saw Deborah's face contort through its rainbow of colors as Officer Martinez revealed Sarah's identity. They heard her false accusations, her threats, her complete meltdown in crystal clear, high-definition glory. The crowd was transfixed. Some laughing, others shaking their heads in disgust. "Play it again," someone shouted from the crowd, and nervous laughter rippled through the audience. I looked back at where Deborah had been sitting, just in time to see her scrambling to her feet. Even from across the field, I could see the horror on her face. She tried to run, but tripped over someone's cooler, sending drinks flying everywhere. People were pointing now, recognizing her from the video. "Hey, it's her. It's the Karen." The video finally ended, but the damage was done. 500 people had just watched Deborah's greatest humiliation in larger-than-life detail. Tommy was staring at his iPad in shock. "I didn't mean to." "How did it?" His mother hugged him. "It's okay, honey. It was an accident." But I caught the smile she was trying to hide. Within a week, a for sale sign appeared in front of Deborah's house. Within 2 weeks, it was sold. The new owners told us they'd gotten an amazing deal because the previous owner was very motivated to sell quickly. Later, we heard Deborah had moved to Florida, where she was already making a name for herself. Someone forwarded me a news article. Local woman calls police on neighbor's flamingo lawn ornament. Old habits die hard, I guess. Tommy's YouTube channel exploded after the movie night incident. He now has over 100,000 subscribers and a series called HOA Hall of Shame. His most popular video, The Night I Accidentally Destroyed a Karen, has over 10 million views and counting. But here's the real twist, the one you didn't see coming. This whole time, while I've been telling you this story, we've been live. That's right. This video you're watching right now is streaming live. Tommy's sitting right behind me with his camera, broadcasting to 847,000 viewers simultaneously. Everything I just told you, you're the first people in the world to hear it. And right now, as I'm saying these words, Sarah is walking into the room. She doesn't know we're live. She's about to say something about the federal case worth $500 million she's been working on. This is happening right now, in real time, and you're all witnesses to whatever comes next. Sarah's coming in right now. Everyone comment, "Hi Chief Sarah," before she realizes we're live. Share this video in the next 10 seconds with the hashtag Karen versus Police Chief. Who's going to be our 1 millionth subscriber? It could be you. Tommy is going to pick 10 random commenters to send exclusive junior detective badges to. Let's make this the most viral HOA story ever. And remember, if you've got a Karen in your neighborhood, document everything. Thanks for watching, and remember, karma works best when it's caught on camera.